You're watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. So what does history tell us about relations between the current and ascendant world power? For some answers, I have spoken to Graham Allison, a prominent American political scientist. He has been heavily involved in the U.S. foreign and defense policy in the 1960s and 70s when the U.S. was dealing with the former Soviet Union. He is best known for coining the term Thucydides Trap to refer to the situation when a rising power causes concerns in an established power which escalates towards war. He used the term to illustrate the relationship between the United States, the existing power, and China, the rising power. He said the Thucydides Trap is something both countries should avoid. With the trade war going on between China and the U.S., the question now is, what can be done to nip it in the bud? Thucydides Trap, something you warned between China and the United States, is it on the way to come, given the latest trade dispute?
I would say that Thucydides is probably watching carefully and saying everybody is on script. So unfortunately, I think the storyline looks like it's emerging. Yeah.
What exactly is that storyline?
Well, the storyline is with a rising power, like Athens 2,500 years ago, or Germany 100 years ago, or China today, threatens to displace a ruling power, like the U.S. today. In general, the outcome is a war, catastrophic war. Now, not in all the cases. I look at the last 500 years, I find 16 cases when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, 12 of them in war, 4 of them in not war. So to say war inevitable would be a big mistake. So we hope this will be the fifth case of no war, not the 13th case.
You could argue now things are more connected than ever before.
Yes.
And probably this is a good thing.
Yes, and because that provides some ballast in the relationship. We have a great stakes in working together, but in this relationship in which, on the one hand, China feels bigger, stronger, deserves more say, more sway, feels like it's being confined, and the Americans think, wait a minute, we have to cling to the status quo because this is the order that's provided all.
Is the 60 billion tariffs on Chinese goods a sign of U.S. trying to maintain its power? Is that how it is?
I think Thucydides would say that's the kind of thing the ruling power might do, being threatened and fearful of the rising power, and imagining that these small actions would have some impact when actually they may be counterproductive.
That's exactly what I meant. In a way, is it going to help the incumbent power, or is it going to hurt the incumbent power?
Again, Thucydides would tell us that the behavior is one thing. It's thought to be constructive, but it's often destructive. So if you look at the ways in which Sparta felt obliged to come to the relief of Corinth, even though it didn't like Corinth and thought Corinth was acting against its interest, it still felt, I should do this, and then one thing leads to the other, and pretty soon they find themselves where they don't want to be. And I think a trade conflict in particular, if it escalated, could get both China and the U.S. doing things that, even though they don't make any sense, their blood is up, they're feeling the other one is pushing me around, and under those circumstances it becomes very dangerous.
Do you think the U.S. side would have any way of coming back to logic?
I certainly hope so, because I live in the U.S.
But what is backing you of thinking and hoping so?
Well, I say partly that I'm an optimistic person. I'm always hopeful. But I think that in the dynamics of the U.S., often there's an overreaction at one stage to which then the rest of the system pushes back a bit. And I think as people look at the danger in the relationship between the U.S. and China, there's some reason for thinking that it'll stabilize. But I would say not yet. And if I were betting, things will get worse before they get worse.
You mean the tariffs will be even higher?
Well, I think the 90 days is the beginning of it, but I think an even more interesting, and what Thucydides again teaches us, is that in this tense relationship or this dangerous dynamic, each misunderstands the other. So even when one or the other is trying to be helpful or trying to be more sensible, The other says, oh, well, I think it has an ulterior motive. So I think the risk of misunderstanding is very great, and then when you have great misunderstandings, the risk of misjudgments and mistakes become very large. So I think that's why communication between people and between the governments is so important.
Communication, whether it is successful or not, is based on trust, to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, yes.
But we are not seeing many cases of trust between this administration in Washington, D.C. and the current Chinese government, for example. We haven't seen anything that would come here as the basis for trust, do we?
Well, it's a good question. So I think that sometimes Chinese talk about mutual trust, but if you look at the statement in the 19th Party Congress, it backs up a little bit, and it says mutual respect rather than trust. So I may not trust you, but I may have enough respect for you that we talk with each other, and I'm not sure you're telling the truth all the time. You're not sure I'm telling the truth all the time, but we're talking and we're listening and we're trying to understand. So I would say the first instance, mutual respect and some appreciation for each other's core interests.
One of the things, Professor Allison, is whether we have in your system any forces that would help to go back onto the track of discussion and negotiation.
Well, I think that they are in the system, so, and I think they will be even more so.
Who are they?
So the business community is one part, and especially the parts of the business community that know that they have the biggest stakes in China. So there's a lot of American companies that are very active in China. There's a lot of trade between the U.S. and China. There's a lot of people who consume goods that are made in China. So all those voices, as they discover that their interests are being threatened, will become, I think, more important. Whether they'll be sufficient to deal with the Trump administration, which has a very strong view on this matter, and a very unusual view, that is at least a view that's sharply different than the consensus view for the previous 3 or 4 decades, is that's an uncertainty. Yeah.
People have been using the analogy of adult and child. I'm not sure whether it is the most appropriate to discuss of the matters between states, but the question is, the apparent child has a lot of power in hand. Where is the stabilizing factor that you are talking about?
My hope is that as we recognize the stakes for each of the parties, that you'll find more people in the system, in Congress, of which there are a number of people, in the business community, in the think tank community, and academic community like myself, saying, let's try to understand the bigger picture in which we have many vital interests between the U.S. and China, have been having serious competition, can be very constructive, but it needs to be within a framework. So I think what we need to be doing is thinking how in this difficult transition and in this difficult dynamic, because it is true that China is getting bigger and stronger, and it is true that that has an impact on Americans and their consciousness and their role in the world. So trying to cope with this requires a great leap of imagination.
My exclusive interview with Graham Allison, the author about the Thucydides Trap. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.